A 7-year-old vanished inside America's most visited monument in 1995. What park rangers found 6 years later in a hidden staircase still gives me chills every time I think about it. Before we dive into this case that haunts me to this day, make sure to hit that subscribe button because we're uncovering mysteries that mainstream media won't touch. And trust me, you'll want notifications on for what's coming next. Drop a comment right now. Have you ever felt watched in a crowded place? Because after today's story, you might understand why that feeling exists. I've been investigating cold cases for over 15 years, but nothing prepared me for what I discovered about the Statue of Liberty incident of 1995. As a former NYPD detective turned private investigator, I thought I'd seen everything. Serial killers, organized crime, corruption that reached the highest levels of government. But this case changed how I look at public spaces forever. It made me understand that sometimes the most dangerous predators hide in the places we trust most. My name is Detective James Crawford, and what I'm about to tell you has kept me awake for years. The official reports will tell you one story, the FBI files paint another picture, but the truth is darker than anything you'll find in government documents. It's a story about how evil can flourish in the shadows of our most sacred symbols, how bureaucracy can enable monsters, and how a family's dream vacation became their worst nightmare. When I first heard about the Morrison case, I was still working Manhattan homicide. A missing kid at the Statue of Liberty seemed straightforward. Tragic, but straightforward. Kids get separated from parents in crowded tourist areas. They wander off, get scared, hide. Usually they turn up within hours, found crying in some corner by a security guard. But Tommy Morrison didn't turn up. Not in hours, not in days, not in years. And that's when I knew something was fundamentally wrong. It was July 4th, 1995, Independence Day. The Statue of Liberty was packed with tourists celebrating America's birthday. Nearly 20,000 visitors would pass through Liberty Island that day. Among them was the Morrison family from Cincinnati, Ohio, David, Sarah, and their 7-year-old son, Tommy. They'd saved for 18 months to make this trip happen. David worked double shifts at the General Electric plant, sometimes pulling 16-hour days. Sarah cleaned houses for wealthy families in Hyde Park, scrubbing floors and washing windows to put aside every dollar she could. This wasn't just a vacation for the Morrisons. This was their American dream manifested. David's grandfather had immigrated from Ireland in 1924 and had told stories about seeing Lady Liberty from the ship's deck, tears streaming down his face. Now, 3 generations later, David was bringing his son to see the same sight that had welcomed his family to America. The symbolism wasn't lost on any of them. I spoke with Sarah Morrison 3 years ago, and even now, her voice trembles when she recalls that day. She told me Tommy had been preparing for this trip like it was a school project. He'd checked out every book about the Statue of Liberty from the Cincinnati Public Library. He knew that Frederick Auguste Bartholdi designed it, that it was a gift from France, that the internal structure was created by Gustave Eiffel. Did you know, Mom, that Lady Liberty's crown has 25 windows representing gemstones and the heavens' rays shining over the world? He'd said that morning over breakfast at their hotel. Those were among the last coherent words she heard her son speak. Tommy was small for his age, barely 40 pounds, with sandy brown hair and eyes that seemed too old for his 7 years. He had his father's curiosity and his mother's gentle nature. Sarah showed me photos from that morning. Tommy posing in front of their hotel mirror, wearing his favorite red Cincinnati Reds baseball cap and clutching a small American flag they'd bought at a souvenir stand. In the pictures, he's grinning with the kind of pure joy that only children possess. Looking at those photos now, knowing what happened later, breaks something inside me every time. The family arrived on the 10:30 a.m. ferry from Battery Park. The boat was packed with families, tour groups, and foreign visitors, all eager to celebrate Independence Day at America's most iconic monument. Security footage shows them disembarking at 10:51 a.m. Tommy running ahead of his parents toward the statue's base, his red cap bright against the crowd of navy and white summer clothes. They entered the monument at 11:47 a.m. Tommy is clearly visible in the security feed, bouncing on his toes as they waited in line, pointing up at Lady Liberty's torch and asking his parents questions they couldn't answer. That footage has been analyzed frame by FBI behavioral analysts, Homeland Security experts and missing person specialists. Every pixel scrutinized, every shadow examined, but it tells us nothing about what was coming. The statue's interior is more claustrophobic than most people expect. The copper shell is thinner than a penny in most places, and the internal framework creates a maze of narrow passages, service ladders, and forgotten spaces. Even in 1995, before post-9/11 security measures, the National Park Service knew they couldn't monitor every corner of the monument. There were simply too many blind spots, too many areas where someone could disappear from view. The Morrisons decided to climb to the crown, like thousands of other visitors that day. It's a grueling journey that tests even fit adults. 354 steps through narrow, winding staircases that spiral up through the statue's body. The stairs are barely wide enough for two people, and they create natural choke points where groups get separated, where children can fall behind, where parents lose track of their kids in the crush of bodies moving upward. The climb takes most visitors 30 to 40 minutes, and many give up halfway, defeated by the heat, the crowds, and the physical demands. Park Ranger Janet Wells was working crowd control that day. 23 years on the job, she'd seen every type of tourist crisis imaginable: heart attacks on the stairs, panic attacks in the crown, children having meltdowns when they realized how high they were. She remembers the Morrison family starting their ascent because Tommy had approached her with a question that stuck with her. "Ma'am, do you think Lady Liberty ever gets lonely standing in the harbor all by herself, looking out at the ocean forever and ever?" The question caught her off guard. Most kids asked about the torch or the crown. Tommy was thinking about the statue's emotions. "Smart kid," she told me during our interview. "Asked questions that made you think deeper than you wanted to think. But here's where everything goes wrong, where a family's dream becomes an unthinkable nightmare." According to the official report, the family was separated during the climb around the 200-step mark, roughly halfway to the crown. The narrow staircase creates natural bottlenecks where faster climbers push past slower ones. Groups get split up constantly. It's one of the most common complaints from visitors. David Morrison claims he and Sarah were caught in a surge of tourists, pushed forward by the crowd's momentum. They assumed Tommy was right behind them, maybe just a few steps back with another family. When they reached the crown viewing area 25 minutes later and looked back down the stairwell, their son was gone. Sarah's scream is something that haunts every person who heard it that day. The sound echoed through the hollow interior of the statue like something primal, something that reached into your chest and squeezed your heart. It was the sound of a mother realizing her child had vanished into thin air. Park rangers would later describe it as the most terrifying sound they'd ever heard, not because it was loud, but because of the raw, animalistic terror it contained. Within minutes, Park Ranger Wells activated the monument's emergency protocol. All exits were sealed immediately. No one could enter or leave Liberty Island. The Coast Guard was notified to watch for anyone attempting to leave by boat. The NYPD Harbor Unit dispatched 3 vessels to patrol the waters around the island. Every visitor on the monument, over 3,000 people, was required to remain in place while park rangers conducted an immediate sweep of every accessible area. They searched the museum, the gift shop, the pedestal galleries, the crown chamber, the torch platform, and even the restricted maintenance areas that tourists never see. Nothing. They brought in additional rangers from other sites, called in off-duty personnel, contacted the FBI field office. As the hours passed, the search became more desperate, more thorough. They started moving visitors out in small groups, checking identification, asking if anyone had seen a small boy in a red baseball cap. Nobody had. Tommy Morrison had vanished inside America's symbol of freedom, and no one could explain how. The FBI was called within hours. This wasn't just a missing child case anymore. This was a potential national security incident. A child disappearing inside one of America's most secure and monitored monuments, on Independence Day no less, raised every red flag in the Federal Law Enforcement Handbook. Agent Rebecca Torres was assigned as lead investigator. I tracked her down in retirement in Scottsdale, Arizona, and she agreed to speak with me off the record after I convinced her that the truth needed to come out. We treated it like a terrorist situation initially, she told me over coffee, her hands still shaking slightly when she talked about the case. A child disappearing inside the Statue of Liberty on July 4th? We couldn't rule out anything. Foreign agents, domestic terrorists, some kind of message being sent to America. The timing was too perfect to be coincidental. The FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Force was activated. Every federal agency with jurisdiction was brought in. Homeland Security, Secret Service, even the NSA started monitoring communications for any mention of the incident. They brought in the best search teams available. FBI evidence response teams, NYPD emergency services, search and rescue specialists from the Coast Guard, and K-9 units trained in both living and cadaver detection. The dogs were brought through every inch of the accessible monument. They found nothing, no scent trail, no indication that Tommy had ever left the stairwell area. Thermal imaging equipment was deployed to check for heat signatures in walls, floors, hidden spaces. Ground-penetrating radar was used to scan beneath the monument's foundation for any underground chambers or burial sites. The statue was closed to tourists for 6 days, while they methodically dismantled every component they could access. They removed display cases, pulled up floorboards in the museum, examined every air vent and maintenance shaft. They brought in structural engineers who knew the monument's construction better than anyone alive. They found nothing. Not a piece of clothing, not a footprint, not a single trace of Tommy Morrison. It was as if the 7-year-old had simply dissolved into the metal and stone of Lady Liberty herself, becoming part of the monument that was supposed to represent hope and freedom. The media went insane. CNN, NBC, every major network picked up the story. Boy vanishes inside Statue of Liberty dominated headlines for weeks. Theories ranged from kidnapping to accidental falls to something far more sinister. The Morrison family appeared on talk shows pleading for information. David Morrison aged 10 years in 10 days. Sarah stopped sleeping, stopped eating. The guilt was consuming them alive. Conspiracy theories flourished in the information vacuum that followed. The internet was still young in 1995, but bulletin boards and early chat rooms exploded with speculation. Some claimed the government was covering up a security breach that could have exposed vulnerabilities to foreign agents. Others suggested the statue had hidden chambers used for human trafficking, pointing to its history as an immigration symbol. The most disturbing theory involved a staff member with access to restricted areas who had been taking children for years without anyone noticing. The trafficking theory gained particular traction when researchers discovered that several children had gone missing from Liberty Island over the previous decade, though none had been connected at the time. A 5-year-old from Detroit in 1987 reported as wandering away from parents during a tour. An 8-year-old from Boston in 1990, assumed to have fallen overboard despite no evidence. A 6-year-old from Atlanta in 1993, last seen near the statue's base before vanishing without a trace. The patterns were there, but no one had bothered to look for them until Tommy Morrison disappeared in broad daylight with thousands of witnesses nearby. Every park employee was polygraphed, investigated, and cleared through extensive background checks. But suspicion lingered like a toxic cloud over Liberty Island. Rangers started watching each other, questioning motivations, wondering if the person standing next to them could be capable of harming a child. The psychological damage to the staff was immense. Many requested transfers. Some quit entirely. The monument that was supposed to inspire hope became a place of fear and mistrust. The Morrisons became unwilling celebrities, their tragedy broadcast to millions of American homes. They appeared on Dateline NBC, 60 Minutes, Larry King Live, every major news program desperate for answers. David Morrison aged 10 years in 10 days, his hair turning grey, deep lines carving themselves into his face. Sarah stopped sleeping, stopped eating, surviving on nothing but coffee and the desperate hope that someone, somewhere, had seen their son. The guilt was consuming them alive, eating away at their marriage, their sanity, their will to continue living. "We should have held his hand," Sarah told me, tears streaming down her face, even 25 years later. "We should have made him stay between us. We should have turned around sooner. We should have never let him out of our sight." Every parent on that monument was watching their kids, but we trusted that he was safe. We trusted that nothing bad could happen in a place like that. How stupid were we? The self-blame in her voice was devastating. These were good parents who had made a reasonable assumption that proved catastrophically wrong. By September 1995, the FBI officially suspended active investigation. The case remained open, but resources were redirected. The Morrisons returned to Cincinnati, their lives shattered. David started drinking. Sarah couldn't bear to look at photos of Tommy. Their marriage fell apart within 2 years. The statue reopened to tourists, but something had changed. Staff members reported an uneasy feeling in certain areas, especially the narrow stairwells where Tommy was last seen. I interviewed former park ranger Mike Patterson, who worked Liberty Island from 1992 to 2003. He told me something chilling. After the Morrison incident, we started hearing sounds, footsteps in empty stairwells, a child's voice echoing when no kids were around. Management told us it was the wind, structural settling, but we knew better. We could feel something was wrong. The years passed. 1996, 1997, 1998. The case grew cold. Tommy Morrison became another missing child statistic, another family destroyed by an inexplicable tragedy. The FBI file gathered dust. The media moved on to fresh horrors, but Liberty Island's maintenance staff lived with daily reminders of that July 4th disappearance. Then came March 15th, 2001. 6 years, 8 months, and 11 days after Tommy Morrison vanished. Maintenance worker Carlos Delgado was performing routine structural inspection in the statue's interior framework, areas that are completely off-limits to tourists and accessible only to authorized personnel with specialized training. Carlos had been working on Liberty Island for 12 years. He knew every bolt, every beam, every hidden corner of the monument better than anyone except the original construction teams. He was checking for corrosion in the support beams near the statue's left shoulder when he noticed something that didn't belong. One of the service access panels, a maintenance hatch that should have been permanently sealed, looked wrong. From a distance, it appeared normal, but when Carlos approached and touched it, the panel moved slightly. It should have been welded shut during the 1986 restoration project. Instead, someone had carefully removed the original welds and installed hidden hinges, so sophisticated they were nearly invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. Carlos called his supervisor, Jim Hartford, a 28-year veteran of the National Park Service. Together, they examined the panel more closely. The work was professional, almost surgical in its precision. Someone with extensive knowledge of the statue's construction had modified this access point, turning it into a secret entrance to areas that didn't officially exist. They opened the panel with trembling hands and found themselves staring into a narrow maintenance shaft that dropped down into darkness. The shaft led to a forgotten service stairway, probably built during the statue's original construction in the 1880s and later sealed off during various renovations over the decades. But someone had reopened it, carefully removed tons of debris and construction materials, and created a hidden pathway through the monument's interior. The stairway was narrow enough that an adult would have to crawl, but a child could walk upright. At the bottom of that hidden staircase, Carlos found something that made his blood run cold. Tommy Morrison's red Cincinnati Reds baseball cap, faded but unmistakable. But the cap wasn't the worst discovery. Carved into the metal wall of the hidden chamber were words scratched by small fingers, letters pressed so deep into the copper that they must have taken hours to complete. "Help me, Mommy. I'm scared. Please find me." Below that message, dozens of tally marks had been carved in groups of 5, as if someone had been counting days, weeks, maybe months. The implications were horrifying. Tommy hadn't died immediately. He had been alive down there, alone in the darkness, keeping track of time, believing his parents would eventually find him. The hidden staircase led to an abandoned utility room in the statue's base, a space that had been forgotten for decades during various renovation projects. The room was larger than expected, roughly 12 feet by 8 feet, with no official entrance or exit except through the secret passage Carlos had discovered. Inside that forgotten chamber, they found evidence that someone had been living there, possibly for years. A makeshift bed constructed from stolen Park Service blankets, empty food containers that could be traced to the monument's cafeteria, and most disturbing of all, children's drawings covering every available wall surface. The drawings weren't just Tommy's work. Forensic handwriting analysis revealed at least 4 different children had created artwork in that hidden room. Different ages, different skill levels, different time periods based on the materials used. Some were drawn in crayon, others in pencil, a few in what appeared to be charcoal. The subjects varied: stick figure families, houses with smiling suns, dogs, cats, and repeatedly drawings of the Statue of Liberty herself, but not the inspiring symbol most people see. These drawings depicted Lady Liberty as a prison, with bars across her windows and sad faces peering out from her crown. One drawing in particular haunts me to this day. It showed a small figure, clearly meant to be a child, standing inside what looked like the statue's body, reaching toward a light source that remained forever out of grasp. At the bottom, in shaky letters, someone had written, "I want to go home." The FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit concluded that multiple children had been held in this chamber over several years, possibly dating back to the late 1980s. DNA evidence confirmed that blood traces found on the walls and makeshift bedding belonged to Tommy Morrison, but they never found his body or the remains of any other children. The investigation revealed that a former park employee named Marcus Webb, dismissed in December 1994 for inappropriate behavior around young visitors, had maintained unauthorized access to restricted areas using stolen master keys that were never recovered when he was terminated. Marcus Webb, age 54 at the time of Tommy's disappearance, had worked as a maintenance supervisor for the National Park Service from 1987 to 1994. His employment record showed numerous complaints about his interactions with children visiting the monument. Parents had reported him asking inappropriate questions about where families were staying, how long they planned to visit New York, whether they were traveling alone. His supervisors had noted that he volunteered for duties that brought him into contact with young visitors, often offering to help lost children find their parents. But Webb's dismissal had been handled quietly, with no criminal charges filed and no alerts sent to other federal agencies. The Park Service had simply terminated his employment and moved on, never imagining that he might continue accessing the monument illegally. Webb had 7 years to perfect his system, 7 years to map every hidden corner of the Statue of Liberty, 7 years to turn America's symbol of freedom into his personal hunting ground. When FBI agents raided Webb's apartment in Queens, they found a collection that made seasoned investigators sick. Photos of children visiting the monument, detailed maps of the statue's hidden passages, and journals describing his hunting techniques. But Webb was gone. His neighbors said he'd disappeared the same week the hidden chamber was discovered. The FBI believes Marcus Webb had been systematically taking children from tourist groups for over a decade. The narrow staircases provided perfect cover. Parents assume their kids are just ahead or just behind in the crowd. By the time anyone realizes a child is missing, Webb had already moved them to his hidden world within Lady Liberty herself. Tommy Morrison's case was officially closed as a homicide, though his body was never recovered. The Morrison family was finally given answers, but closure remained elusive. How do you process the knowledge that your child spent his final days trapped in darkness beneath a symbol of freedom? Sarah Morrison told me she still wakes up hearing Tommy's voice calling for her. Marcus Webb remains on the FBI's most wanted list. Some believe he's dead. Others think he's operating elsewhere, possibly at other national monuments. The thought keeps me awake at night. How many other secure locations have forgotten spaces where predators can hide? How many other children have vanished in plain sight? The Statue of Liberty implemented new security measures after 2001. Every inch of the structure was mapped and monitored. Hidden chambers were permanently sealed. But for those of us who know the truth about Tommy Morrison, the statue will never feel the same. Every time I see her in the harbor, I think about the darkness that once lived inside America's beacon of hope. The case files remain partially classified. The FBI won't discuss details about other potential victims or the full extent of Webb's activities. They claim it's an ongoing investigation, but I believe they're protecting something bigger, something that would shake public trust in our most cherished symbols. I often think about Tommy Morrison's last moments, a 7-year-old boy who loved facts about Lady Liberty, trapped in her shadow by a monster who understood her secrets better than anyone. The irony is crushing. The statue that represents freedom became a prison. The monument that welcomes the world's tired and poor became a hunting ground for evil. What happened to Tommy Morrison at the Statue of Liberty goes beyond a simple abduction case. It represents a systematic failure of our most trusted institutions to protect the innocent. It's a reminder that predators don't just lurk in dark alleys or abandoned buildings. Sometimes they hide in our most sacred spaces, using our assumptions and our sense of security against us. They understand that we drop our guard in places that feel safe, places that represent the best of American values. The investigation taught me that every public space, no matter how secure it appears, has forgotten corners, abandoned passages, and overlooked entrances. Marcus Webb spent years mapping these architectural blind spots, turning them into opportunities for evil. He understood something that still keeps security experts awake at night. The Statue of Liberty, like many historic monuments, was never designed with modern child safety in mind. Its maze-like interior, narrow passages, and multiple levels create perfect conditions for someone to disappear a child without being noticed. But Webb's operation was more sophisticated than opportunistic predation. The hidden chamber contained evidence of careful planning spanning years. He had stockpiled food, water, medical supplies, and even children's books and games, suggesting he kept his victims alive for extended periods. The psychological torture of giving a child hope while keeping them prisoner in the darkness beneath a symbol of freedom represents a level of sadism that challenges our understanding of human evil. The case files reveal that Webb had been studying families before they even reached the monument. Hotel registrations, tour group manifests, ferry passenger lists. He had access to information that allowed him to identify vulnerable targets in advance. Single parents traveling alone with children. Families from out of state who wouldn't be immediately missed. Large tour groups where one missing child might not be noticed until it was too late. Sarah Morrison moved to a remote town in Oregon after the revelation about Webb and his underground chamber. She couldn't bear living in Ohio anymore, where every news report about the statue brought back memories of that July day in 1995. She changed her name, avoided all media contact, and tried to build a life where Tommy's ghost couldn't find her. But trauma doesn't respect geography. In our final conversation, she told me she still hears his voice calling for her in the middle of the night. Still dreams about him scratching messages into metal walls, still wakes up believing she can save him if she just tries hard enough. David Morrison never recovered from the guilt that consumed him after learning the truth. He became obsessed with security protocols at tourist attractions, spending years writing letters to park services, museums, and monuments about the need for better child protection measures. He drank heavily, lost job after job, and died alone in a Cincinnati apartment in 2015. His family believes he died from a broken heart, but I know better. David Morrison died from the knowledge that his son had spent weeks alone in darkness, believing his father would eventually find him and bring him home. The hardest part about this case isn't the mystery of Webb's ultimate fate or the horror of what he did to innocent children. It's the knowledge that Tommy Morrison and the other victims spent their final days hoping for rescue that never came. They carved messages into walls, counted days with tally marks, drew pictures of home, and maintained faith that the adults in their lives would somehow locate them in the labyrinth beneath Lady Liberty. Tommy's case officially remains open, though the FBI believes he died in that underground chamber sometime in late 1995 or early 1996. His body was likely disposed of in ways that ensure it will never be recovered. The other children whose drawings were found in Webb's prison remain unidentified. Their families never received closure, never learned what happened to their sons and daughters, who vanished during what should have been happy family vacations. Marcus Webb disappeared without a trace the same week Carlos Delgado discovered the hidden chamber. His apartment in Queens was abandoned, cleaned out with professional efficiency. Bank accounts were emptied, utilities were cancelled, and all traces of his existence were systematically erased. The FBI believes he had an escape plan prepared for years, possibly including false identities and offshore financial resources. But here's what terrifies me most about the Webb case. He might still be operating. The FBI's behavioral analysis suggests he was too sophisticated, too successful, and too psychologically addicted to his crimes to simply stop. Other national monuments, historic sites, and tourist attractions have reported unexplained disappearances over the years since 2001. Children who vanish during family visits, cases that are quickly classified as accidents or runaways, investigations that stall due to lack of evidence or jurisdictional complications. I've spent 5 years tracking patterns that might indicate Webb's continued activity. A 7-year-old who disappeared during a family visit to Mount Rushmore in 2003. Twin girls who vanished from a tour group at Independence Hall in 2005. A 9-year-old boy who was never found after getting separated from his class during a field trip to the Washington Monument in 2007. The cases share similarities. Children disappearing from crowded, supposedly secure locations, investigations that find no evidence, families destroyed by unanswered questions. The most chilling possibility is that Webb wasn't working alone. The sophistication of his Liberty Island operation, the modifications to the monument structure, the years of careful planning. It suggests resources and expertise beyond what one man could accomplish. There might be a network of predators operating at tourist sites across America, using our most beloved symbols as hunting grounds for their unspeakable crimes. Every time I see the Statue of Liberty rising from New York Harbor, I think about Tommy Morrison's final days. A 7-year-old boy who loved facts about Lady Liberty, who wanted to see her crown and torch up close, who believed in the promise of freedom she represents. Instead, he found himself trapped in her shadow by a monster who understood her secrets better than anyone. The irony is crushing and permanent. The statue that represents freedom became a prison. The monument that welcomes the world's tired and poor became a death trap for innocence. The Morrison case changed how I understand evil. It's not always dramatic or obvious. Sometimes it hides in plain sight, wearing uniforms and badges, carrying keys to places we trust, knowing our routines better than we know them ourselves. Marcus Webb spent 7 years learning how to turn our most sacred symbol into an instrument of horror. He succeeded because we never imagined that someone could be so patient, so calculating, so willing to wait for the perfect moment to destroy a family forever. What do you think really happened to Tommy Morrison in that hidden chamber beneath the Statue of Liberty? Was Marcus Webb working alone, or is there a larger network of predators operating at America's most trusted tourist sites? Share your theories in the comments below, and if you've experienced anything strange during visits to national monuments, don't stay silent. Sometimes the truth is hidden in the places we least expect to find it, waiting for someone brave enough to speak up and demand answers that authorities don't want to give.